Welcome to the video of my design-based research project on strengthening the reflective attitude to the relationship between the objective theory and one's own involvement. Or simply, why diversity management doesn't work without me. How do I approach this topic? To start, I will give a short background and explain the basic assumptions from which the DBR project started. As a follow-up, I will explain what I used as a theoretical anchor point for the objective of my project, global citizenship. From this, the methodological framework as well as the design object is deducted, or one could also say to which DBR modeling is my DBR project oriented. I provide insights into the cyclical design and the course of the project before I explain the central derivations as well as transferability and limitations. With this in mind, enjoy the look. Brief background. I have been an associate lecturer in the elective diversity management at the University of Koblenz since 2019, after having been a full-time lecturer there myself for 6 years. The project was conducted as part of my course Diversity Management at Universities, and the students who take this elective come from the so-called two-subject bachelor's program, and 95% study a combination of the two of the following three subjects: psychology, sociology, and management and economics. The starting position for me is as follows. Students who already start the course with a career goal usually want to work in the HR department of a company that is as large as possible. The elective diversity management is often, according to my perception, a springboard for them because the subject is modern and unavoidable. They usually come to my course in the third or fourth semester and have developed a consumer attitude through their basic subjects. So they want me to tell them how diversity management has to be designed in order to be successful. Most of them come to the elective very unreflectively. Many, according to my earlier observations, develop their own attitude to the content over time and reflect on their position in the social structure, but often only in the mandatory internship. At the same time, my own teaching attitude is characterized by the fact that I do not see myself as mere transmitter of knowledge, but rather as a guide in the learning process. It is important to me to promote my own attitude and competencies on different levels. The DBR project developed out of the discrepancy, which fits in wonderful with the course since it directly concerns the student's life world, diversity management at universities. My goal for the project was therefore to develop in the students an awareness of their own involvement with a theoretical object. To achieve this, I use a structured reflection built into my seminar. The following design assumption is based on this. In order to achieve a reflection of one's own attitude towards the study content in the seminar Diversity Management at Universities, I will include reflection loops because I hope to create eureka moments among the students which will make clear to them how their own position and attitude influence their future work and research. This also leads me to the theoretical anchor for the DBR project. This is also part of the seminar topic. Namely, it is borrowed from psychological diversity management research and refers to the goal with which universities educate students. Thus, Pitsonka states, outcome-oriented higher education should not only ensure that students are professionally qualified, employability, but also to train or develop students to become active citizens in a democratic society and, to this end, impart appropriate competencies with significance for society, citizenship. According to Pitsonka, the goals of academic education are knowledge transfer, employability, and citizenship. Exactly these three aspects are also found in the design assumption. The transfer of knowledge is found in the student content, employability in the benefits for future work, and the development of citizenship in one's own position and attitude. Another theory component for the DBR project is, of course, the topic area of reflection. However, both aspects also lead me to my choice of DBR modeling. I have chosen Freyfeld's model here. Why? Well, the model convinces by the simple knitting pattern. Design, application, analysis. In my project, this was definitely evident in its simplicity, which was partly due to time. At the same time, the model is based on experienced requirements and theoretical impulses, especially at the beginning. For my specific case, a small adjustment to the model must be made here. The project started from the pure realization of the requirements. The integration of the theory, so I would conclude for my project, happened only in a later cycle. This would also be an aspect that I actually miss in the illustration here, that the theory again and again also underpins the project in each cycle again. Here, the model of ISO et al. Would be more appropriate, where theory and design generate their own cycles. What did the design object look like in concrete terms? This developed over time. At the beginning of the project, the seminar was an online seminar with 5 synchronous dates, each with 2 or 3 weeks between them. In order to design a reflection over a longer period of time, I wanted to design the reflection parallel to the seminar. The first cycle was designed slightly differently. This was due to the following reasons: lack of preparation time before the first date, as well as content concerns. Am I allowed to force students to reflect on their own attitudes? Do I know what students would reflect on of their own and what I need to guide them to do? For this reason, the design item in the first cycle was as follows. The reflection was placed as a reflection paper at the end of the semester. A few reflection prompts were included in the assignment. An alternative was offered, but seemed more time-consuming for students. They had to do a research outline with an analysis of 3 texts on the potential term paper topic. All participant students handed in a reflection paper. That was 14 people. However, an initial analysis showed that the fears that the students would perceive it as a constraint, or that they would only reflect in a socially desirable way, were unfounded. This encouraged me to implement the original plan in the second cycle. Certain reflection content was taken directly from the students' reflection papers. On the second cycle, in the summer semester in 2021, 9 students participated in the sessions. The reflection tasks were always handed in at the seminar date. The third cycle, in the winter semester 2021, was then a very small group of 5 students. There, the principal took place similarly. Which modification were made, I explain again in a moment. The fourth cycle, the summer semester 2022, was then completely different because the seminar took place as a face-to-face event and no longer on 6 dates, but the content block was dealt with over a weekend. Here, the reflection was integrated into the block after each session. Looking at this now in a cyclical way, the first phase started with the design of the reflection paper assignment at the end of the semester. Implementation then occurred during the semester but posterior to the content block. In retrospect, it became clear that the previous concerns were unnecessary and the implementation could proceed as originally planned, in other words, during the semester. In preparation for the semester-long implementation, theoretical input was also incorporated for the first time. Here, in particular, to the topic reflection, including the learning reflection. The design of these theoretical impulses was based on the thematic models of the seminar. The reflection of one's own positioning was thus always related to the thematical focal point, for example, studying and teaching. The implementation then took place semester accompanying between the synchronous dates. In the subsequent retrospective and the detailed analysis of the first 2 cycles, it became clear that the perceived depth of reflection was worse in the second cycle. More on this in the theoretical derivations in a moment. To address this between the second and the third cycle, citizenship, or more generally the goal of academic education, was then addressed, which again led to an adjustment in the design. However, this was more in the setting for framing of the task. Otherwise, the implementation was the same as in cycle 2. At the end of cycle 3, it became apparent that interventions that had been changed in the setting were having the desired effect. At the same time, I was faced with the challenge of converting the previous online settings into a face-to-face format for the 4th cycle. This resulted in a reflection journal that was handed out to the students in paper form. This was implemented in the content block itself, where students were given 15 minutes after each unit to record their reflections. In fact, students were free to choose whether or not I got to see this. I ended up photographing everyone who allowed me to do so. Surprisingly, of the 8 participants, 7 showed willingness. For me, this also points to the important setting conditions, which I will discuss in a moment. At the same time, similar content-related phenomena appeared as after the second cycle, since the depth of reflection was not given. Presumably, this is due to the lack of time for intensive reflection. If necessary, design changes would have to be made for further cycles. What does this mean for theory? I would like to pick out one example, namely the analysis of the first and second cohort. This also caused me to reflect on my own attitude, my teaching attitude. While the first cohort reflected openly without fear of contact, this was rarely restricted in the second cycle and led to statements such as, "I don't want to talk about my own experiences." I have tried to summarize the irritation this caused me again here. In the first case, I named my own research interest, but in the second case, I did not. In the first case, reflection occurred at the end of the semester, whereas in the second cohort, reflection had to occur virtually without a relationship of trust being established. The importance of the learner-teacher relationship therefore seemed significant to me and led me to place a special focus on precisely this in the third and fourth cycle. At the same time, of course, I was concerned with the question of the extent to which global citizenship as an objective has been achieved or is achievable at all, and whether one's own attitude towards the theoretical object can be trained. If you look at the theory and the literature, Pizanka says that fundamental changes in attitude are hardly and not sustainably changeable through workshops, and it would need long and intensive self-made experiences so that it could come to attitude changes. It would have to follow that this would also have had no effect in my DBR project. But in fact, there are some examples that illustrate that it did have the desired effect, at least in isolated cases. For example, one participant wrote in the evaluation, "I never thought about my own role in relation to diversity before. Now I see the examples everywhere." Just a few weeks ago, an email from a participant in the third cohort reached me in which stood, "I had moments in the internship when I had to think about your seminar and the reflection tasks, because suddenly I, as a person, also played a role in interventions. Thanks again for the inspiration." But what exactly are the points that I can identify as conditions for success? My assumption is that the socially relevant topic is needed. Of course, these are also the topics in which I am active, diversity, but also peace and sustainability, for example. At the same time, an important factor was the trust relationship between teacher and students. And another factor that can be based on the literature would be the connection to the everyday world or the possibility to make one's own experiences in it. This fits at least to Pizanka's statements that a recurring occupation and own experiences are necessary to change attitudes sustainably. At the same time, the question remains, where are the limits of the approach? For example, the question is whether global citizenship is equally a goal of academic education in all disciplines. Of course, I would say yes, because even more natural scientific fields have to deal with, for example, sustainable use, climate damage, or military use of interventions. But other people may see this differently. At the same time, there remains the question of the death of reflection, which was again become apparent in the last cycle in particular, and where the question of alternatives must be thought. Is the development of one's own attitude towards the theoretical object, thus global citizenship, perhaps not to be seen in the context of a seminar, but rather in the context of the entire elective or entire curriculum? And in the end, of course, it remains to be seen whether the structured approach has really moved everyone to deeper reflection, or whether it has nevertheless only reached isolated students. These are all open questions that need to be addressed further, but which would go beyond the scope of this presentation. Therefore, I will close at this point and look forward to feedback to my DBR project. Here are my contact details.